Welcome to the Hammond Museum's Element of Tea series, episode 9. We are actually looking forward to the opening coming up in the spring, especially with April 23rd being the official opening day with a small tea ceremony and garden tours and a number of entertainments and brush paintings in the exhibit. It's a small matter of like getting started, but actually at the same time, we wanted to be able to sort of take this series and bring it on to the actual Hammond Museum so that you can enjoy the fruits of your labor watching this program. My name is Martin Hara. I'm a board member and I'm responsible for actually organizing some of the aspects with the tea club and activities at the Hammond Museum as well. I'm going to introduce to you I have Michael Mckenna, who is the president of the Hammond Tea Club, and he will introduce to you Mr. Michael Harney, who is a principal of Harney Tea, and I'm sure that there'll be an interesting dialogue between the two to explain and to discuss some aspects of tea with this group, because although we see it from the sense of matcha, sees it from a larger point of view as well. I'm recording this thing for archive purposes, so if you stay on online, then it acknowledges your consent to be recorded. Although you could shut your camera off if you don't want to be seen, but that's okay. In any case, I just wanted to be sure that we got the content of our meeting together. All right, so with that said, I'm introducing Michael Mckenna, president of the Hammond Tea Club.
Martin, thank you. I am Michael Mckenna, and my job through this series of 9 sessions that we have recorded over pretty much the last year, uh, my job is to try and link each of the different elements that we have discussed: the scrolls, the teacups, um, the gardens, the tea flowers, the tea sweets, all these different elements, and pull them all together uh, around the idea of the tea ceremony, CHANOYU, as what we call in English the tea ceremony. Tonight, it's my great privilege to be able to welcome Michael Harney of Harney Tea to a discussion of matcha, the tea of the CHANOYU, the tea of the tea ceremony. First of all, Michael, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. I would imagine that most of our listeners have heard of or are aware of Harney and Sons, but for any who have not had that pleasure yet, would you tell us about yourself and a little bit about your company?
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Michael. I mean, you're such a smart man and always great with words, and I always enjoy that. The other thing that's great is that we're both Michaels, so that we don't have to worry about remembering the names. So that'll be very easy. My father started Harney and Sons back in 1983, which is either a long time ago or not very long ago, depending upon how you view it. But he was running an inn over there in Route 44 in Salisbury, Connecticut, and in the early 60s, 1960s, they had, I guess, gotten a little bored with just running the small inn and started diversifying into various things. So one of the things was to roast their own coffee. These before the days before there was a Starbucks, and fresh roasted coffee was a different thing. It was U-Ban and other sort of instant coffees, and so he started that. And then there was an old Englishman, Stanley Mason, stopped by and said he had retired up to that area, and said, "John, you have a very nice devotion to coffee. You should try the same thing with tea." And Stanley's family had been 3 generations in the tea business. So his grandfather in the 1860s was a person in London that would take tea off of one of those clipper ships, which had raced around Africa, from China, and they would then sell them in southern London. And then his son was in the business, and then Stanley was a grandson, and he had been shipped off to New York in the 1930s to try to help with Brook Bond was the name of the company, and they do Red Rose. I think people have heard of Red Rose teas. That's still up in Canada, not found in the States anymore, I don't think. But Stanley had come over here and then had retired, and then in the 60s started his own little small company. And then he was looking for a way out, 70 years old. He then taught my father about tea, and they ran that tea company until 1988. My father then decided to start one where he wouldn't have to have outside family members. And so he started Harney and Sons Teas. I joined him a few years later. So the first few years it was Harney and Sons, but no sons. And so I joined him in 88, and we were over in Connecticut, moved to New York State because, as you know, Michael, New York State is a low tax state in comparison to Connecticut. So we moved over here to New York, and then it's been going forward. I think we hired your son 9 years ago. I don't know if you know the exact date, but we did hire Chris, and he's been a wonderful addition. And then Chris brought along his bride, Rose, who assists my wife in the tea shop that we have there in Millerton, New York, which is about an hour north of the Hammond.
Yeah, just about.
Just about right. So we are sold or we help people with teas in 6 continents. I believe also in the 7th continent. There was a guy that came by our tea shop and said, you know, I work for NASA, and I'm at the space station down in Antarctica. So he took our tea down there. Of course, they don't sell it down there, but I hope I like to say he still uses our tea down there. So that makes all 7 continents are enjoying, not enduring, our tea. So that's a little bit about us. You know, we have both loose teas, and we have tea bags and iced tea and bottles. It's almost every way you could conceive of tea. And I work with that with my brother, Paul.
So within the larger tea world, what kind of a positioning does Harney and Sons have? Are you
Well, we have
boutique?
sorry,
Go
you want to
ahead.
finish your question? I'm sorry.
No, go on. Go on.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have we do a wide variety of teas. So we have teas like hot cinnamon spice, our #1 seller. Every day we're making, I believe, something like 2,000 pounds a day of that. And that's, you know, spicy flavored tea. So that's a tea that obviously many people enjoy. But we also have, specialty Japanese teas, which of course is tonight's focus. So, I've been over to Japan several times, not as many as you, of course, Michael, but have been over there and have gone to the tea capitals of Japan. The Uji was the original one that is there down outside of Kyoto, the old capital, and I've gone to Kagoshima, which is the place that's making tea right now in Japan, down in the southern island of Kyushu, and then Shizuoka up there, which is 2 hours by a bullet train south of Tokyo. So I've been to all of those places, and we buy lots of specialty teas. So we have both the mass and the class, as they say.
Very good. Before we get too deep into matcha, let's go back just a step and talk a little bit about the different kinds of teas. We hear about black teas and green teas and oolong teas. What differentiates each of those, and then where does the green tea come?
Sure. Well, this is a great time to talk about it because it's very evident to people up in our neck of the woods. I assume most of your people in Westchester, Putnam. Is that a correct statement, Fairfield?
I think so.
Okay. So, I mean, we're all sort of living the dream that we're a little behind, but, where spring is waking up, we had our tulips popping up, and I saw a couple tree buds happening. Now, I mean, this cold weather may have been, the plants may have gotten ahead of themselves, so we'll have to see. But the idea is that the tea that we like is the leaves that grow, and the thing that starts it up in the spring is the same thing that starts up our maple trees. It's the energy that was stored last year in the roots of the plant, and then in the springtime it comes up the tree. So that's how maple syrup happens. It's the energy that's coming back up to get the tree going again, or the tea plant. And so this time of year, they're making tea in China. We're getting in our first tea from China. The first teas of India are happening. So far, my friends tell me it's not high quality yet. And in the southern island of Kyushu, I was told that this is the week that they would start cranking out green tea in Japan. So that's how it starts. Is spring comes, and it doesn't get as cold as it does here in Westchester. I'm up in Litchfield County, Connecticut myself, but the idea is very similar. So the bud comes out, and that is green, and it's the baby of the tea plant. And if you dry that in air, the green turns white. The chlorophyll that looks green is not mature enough, and it turns white. So that's white tea. It's just air dried buds, babies of the tea plant. And that's like a concentrated, all the things that the plant needs to grow all year long are in that little bud. So it has extra sugars and extra proteins, extra caffeine, and extra antioxidants. So it's a very special tea, but it comes out light, so many people don't want to drink it. So then what happens is that when the bud starts to get more mature, leaves come out. Just like in a couple of days, leaves start out. Just like I put my peas in, and so soon they'll pop up out of the ground, we hope, and then start the shoots, and then the leaves start happening. So it goes very fast once it starts. And so once it's green, with green tea, the trick is to fix it green. So just like with the asparagus that we'll be eating in a few short period of time, maybe a month and a half, you throw them into a fry pan, or you put them into a steamer, and you fix it green. That chlorophyll becomes denatured, and it's fixed green. So that's a green tea, Michael. Then the oolongs are semi-oxidized tea. And so that means that oxidation is, it's these two water balloons, you might say, inside each cell that is a self-defense mechanism. And when a bug bites it, it pops those balloons, they mix together, and it forms a big chemical which turns brown. And that's too big for a bug to digest. And so they get an upset tummy, and they don't finish eating the leaves. So that's the semi-oxidized tea. And then black tea, which most of us grew up with, is where it's fully oxidized. So it's like a banana that you forgot about underneath in the kitchen, and it turns black. So that's black tea. So we got white tea, which is the baby, green tea where they fix it green, semi-oxidized tea, which is oolong, and then fully oxidized tea, which is black tea.
So where in that spectrum does matcha come?
Well, matcha is a green tea, and it comes from it originated in Uji, the area that we first talked about. Although it is grown in other parts south of there because there's money in them hills, so they found other places to grow it. And it is a very specific type of green tea. I don't know when you want to start to show the slides and things like that, where we go into the growing and that. Is that an appropriate time now, or do you have other questions?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great time. Martin, can you show us the
Slide
first
one. Yep.
slide one there?
Okay. How's that? Can you see it?
Sure. Okay. Well, this is a part of Japan. It's called Watsuka, and this is about 45 minutes outside of Uji. It's where they grow a lot of matcha plants. And this is where we get our Jobitsugi. I think you've had that,
Yeah.
Michael, right? Right. That's
Yes.
our best, sorry, it's our entry level tea. And that is basically these lovely mountains, hills, and they grow sencha, and then they also grow some basic matcha there. And then so that's it's green, it's pretty.
Michael, could
Yes.
you, am I correct in thinking that the bottom of the slide here shows the tea plants?
You would be absolutely correct. I'm going to put my glasses on. So it was sort of like, and then there's also some in the mid range too. So obviously the darker green is that, and this is a village which I highly recommend if you can get to see. It's great because we did a sort of a Airbnb or just a B&B there, and they made a lovely dinner out of all these different tea plants. And then at night we walked around and saw them making the tea at various factories. So you can just walk up and down these streets of this little village, and they make fabulous teas there. Have you ever had our Matsuda blend, Michael?
I believe so, but it was a while ago.
Yeah, no problem. Well, Mr. Matsuda, he lives, that's his given name, lives right around there, and we always go there. Maybe we go to slide 2 if we could. So this is a Gyokuro garden in the city of Uji, next to the Ujigawa, which for those of us that speak a little bit of Japanese like me, not much like Michael, know that that means river. So this is right next to the Ujigawa in the outskirts of the town of that. And if you look at it, you can see that to the left, right in front of us is grass. So that's not tea plants, but they have the straw thatch over it. And that is that's a Gyokuro garden. That's the traditional way of doing it, where they put more and more straw over it. And that is to basically, someone came up with the idea is if you cover it, it then becomes, the plant has to overcome this. And so they need to get sunlight. So they make more and more chlorophyll, they get greener and greener, and also they develop a particular chemical which we love the way they taste like that, and that's found also in Gyokuro. So the 2 shade grown teas that are there are Gyokuro, which is brewed like a sencha, and matcha, which is the powder form. So one finds that is there, and the it turns out like the place over in the first place that we saw, they do some there, but they also do mostly sencha there, which is the sun-grown tea that most of us would drink every day.
So
this, yes,
if I'm correct, the tan area here, the dried grass
yes,
area here, is a netting that has been placed over
yes,
the mature tea plants at some point late in their development, a few weeks before they're ready to be picked, I think.
that's right. If we go to the next slide, I think that would make a little clearer.
Okay.
So there's from the inside looking to the roof, and on this particular one, you can see the green tea plants.
Okay. Yeah, perfect.
And then this one, they chose to use, they went a little bit less traditional, and they went to using black plastic, which is found much more. It's very rare to find a straw one now. They actually, the chemical that they found that's a little bit extra that I talked about in Japanese, they call it straw flavor. So because of they thought somehow it came from the straw, but it's just a reaction to the lack of sunlight. So you can see they're pretty tall. They're as tall as the average Japanese woman, which of course they're not Swedish, but it's still fairly 4.5 to 5 feet tall, the plant. And the idea is that over time you put more and more, you let more and more shade happen. And so they pluck it by hand. If you were to go back to the first one, which we're not, but where they make sencha, oftentimes they would use a hedge trimmer and go down it, and it would just go into like a big, a big bag, and then it made into sencha. But this because it's expensive, they pluck it by hand. Michael.
So the covering is to force the production of certain kind of enzymes, a certain type of flavor in the tea, the shade grown tea, that's either treated as infusion, um, gyokuro, or else then ground up to a powder for matcha. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct. Now, the difference would be that with a with matcha, unlike other teas, they process it very little, so there's very little heat or no heat involved in it. So oftentimes, I had these kids yesterday from the Culinary Institute over, and they were talking. I said, "What are you studying?" They say, "Heat transfer." You go like, "Oh, I thought you studied cooking," but they study heat transfer. And it's the same thing a little bit with tea, because we do a lot of oftentimes, you're either using steam or you're using like a big hot wok in in China. And so there's a lot of heat transfer. So you develop all these heat flavors, like you might find on an outside of a steak or something like that, or crust of a bread. And in the matcha, they keep it very simple. And if we go to the first video, I can show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. So basically, it's like it's a little bit like you can show it again a little bit. So the leaves just get blown up in the air, and they dry that way. And they don't get steamed at all. They just go up in the air. It's a little bit like well, I was just out in Las Vegas, and where you could do the skydiving, but you just are in a little small building. It's just air blowing up, and it just keeps blowing up and up and up. So that's a little bit, and that makes what they call tencha. Michael, if you had our tencha.
Yes.
So the tencha is just air dried tea. And we don't have, it's up to you if you want to watch the video forever. But that's just that's what happens. They air dry it, and it gets chopped up a little bit. So the leaves, which are fairly big, are there. And so then the next step is it goes to a factory, like our friend Tsuyoshi. Have you ever met him, Michael?
I have, and I visited his grinding room, the one you're going to show in a minute.
Excellent, excellent. And I think he's the one that donated the big urn to the museum.
He did.
And that was great. So, but I think the next video would give you a little idea of how they grind it up. It's amazingly small, these little stone grinders, isn't it?
So just to go back for a minute there, the air drying that you just showed us, that's being shown again, is the way that the new freshest leaves from underneath the covers will be. The next step in the process is to dry them.
This is the drying right there. That's the drying.
With the black tea, the other extreme, there would be rather than just drying them, they would be heated in some way or another.
Well, there's several steps that for a black tea. So what with a black tea, they wouldn't put it through here, but what they do is they put it, they do what they call a wither, which does two things. One, creates drying, so the moisture goes from a very high level to a medium level. And then the other thing is that it creates a whole series of chemical processes where the plant chemicals that are in there start to fall apart, because there's no longer any nourishment coming from the rest of the plant. So everything that was like AB becomes A and B, and then it might combine to become C. So those are some of the things that we find with black tea, is that the flavor chemicals, they fall apart and they recombine, and we like the way they recombine to some of the flavors. So you get that malty flavor for an Assam, or you get the fruit flavors that one might find in a lovely oolong. So those come together, and that happens when that's made. So it's withered, and then it's rolled, so it destroys the the sort of breaks up those two water balloons, so it starts to oxidize, and then it's rolled a bit more. It gives it some shape, the desired shape, and then they put it in an oven. And so when you put it in an oven, just like I mentioned earlier, you get that heat transfer, and you get additional set of flavors which are developed. So
Fascinating.
black tea is a much more complex than the matcha or tencha that we're talking about tonight.
So we get back to matcha now that's air dried. The heat isn't part of it, but after it's dried, then it is ground into a powder, and that's what we're seeing now. Tell us
I'm
about that.
told that a small tin, like the 30 grams that we make, takes an hour to make one of those in one of those machines.
So these are
So
really stone mills.
it's the old stone mill, but they've modernized it, and it is a they got it's tradition on the bottom and robot on the top, if you will, sort of like what do they call that hairdo? Mullet. The mullet, right? Business on the back, no business in front, party in the back.
Well, these are a number of, I forget how many, 100 or so different
Yeah.
stones here that the tencha, the ground up leaves are added here, and the I don't think we can see it exactly, but from the side of the stones, the powder is expelled and collected.
I think it just falls down to the bottom eventually.
Right, right.
Both of us appears to not have asked that question, Michael. But it is kind of fascinating. And then, as you remember, you have to. It's like going into a pharmaceutical lab or something. You have to go through the airlock, and you have to put on special clothes, and then they make sure you don't take any out. It's interesting. Now, the thing that I had mentioned earlier is that the location that the item comes from is the quality. So the closer it is to Uji, the better quality it is. Now, I'm not really sure why, but it must be something with terroir, that the land, and that creates the best flavor, the most umami. The umami is what develops in the springtime, which gives it the mouthfeel and the sweetness. So as it's it has more nitrogen in it, which gives it body and the sweetness of amino acids. So those are all the things that create a fabulous tea, and that's what makes like the Jonatomo. I'm sure I'm butchering the language. You say it much better than me, Michael. But that's what makes that worth more than the Jobitsugi.
So you have 2 or 3 different grades of matcha
We have
that you
about
do.
five grades. So the best time is, as we mentioned, is would be in early middle of, like, the first 10 days of May is sort of the time that it goes crazy. Now then the plant then comes up again in the summertime, and so there's also summer matcha, but that's usually used. We use that we sell it for lattes, and so when that's the culinary matcha that you see out in the marketplace is that. And we also came up with a hybrid one, which is sort of a better. It's like a better a Yugo. It's a better Yugo. It's a little bit higher quality, but it's still summer there. So we have the summer, and then the best thing is in the spring, and that Watska, that hill there, that does the better ceremonial. But we have to go down to Uji itself to get the best for that. And that has, as you know, that's the thick. We call it extra thick because we already had a thick matcha, so we call it extra thick, which I guess it's extra expensive. That's for sure. And you're able to tell the difference, right, Michael?
We can. The different grades. The Jobetsugi is the the grade for thin tea, which means that you use a scoop and a half of the tea, of the matcha for one person's portion of tea. And the later higher grades are used even more concentrated form, so that you're using 3 different scoops, that it becomes a very thick fluid that you're drinking off. It's very, very, with no sweet and no sugar added. It's a very sweet and flavorful
And that's the
drink.
umami, which is a relationship to the nitrogen level and the other amino acids that one finds in there.
So this is the part of what tea people like ourselves, tea ceremony people like ourselves, are interested in, is the thin tea, the thick tea, the special kind of green tea that we're interested in. But in the world, as what Mike has just mentioned about lattes and things like that, tea, matcha, has grown well beyond the boundaries of the tea ceremony. Could you talk a little bit more about that, Mike?
Well, I mean, for many years there was not a lot of matcha consumed. I mean, it would just been people like yourself. But then, nowadays you can find on the street where our shop is down in Soho in Manhattan. There's several matcha bars there. You're like, why didn't I pick up that earlier? But well, that's the rough part of being Irish, But the the people, they said, oh, green tea is healthy, and then if you drink green tea, it's even healthier. So it's the liquid green tea, so it's the actual tea leaves rather than the strained off brew. So I think health was one thing, and then it became cool, and then someone said, well, let's mix in a little bit of milk, and then who likes milk? Let's go with oat milk or almond milk. And so the cows lost out on that particular situation. But that's what you find a lot of. There's ice cream out of matcha. There's the bobo cha, where they put the big
Tapioca.
tapioca is the right word. Thank you, Michael. But the thing with it, when you start to go in, that is the thing that makes it more interesting to the common person or the regular person, is that they say, well, let's add a little bit of sugar, or let's add a lot of sugar, depending upon who we're talking with. And so, in America, we do have, and around the world, there is a certain love of sugar. So that's become important.
Sugar is important, but matcha often gets promoted as very healthy drink.
Absolutely, Michael. So that's an important part of it. Is it there? I mean, the U.S. Food and Drug Association or Administration does not want me to pretend that I am a doctor, so I would leave it to a learned person like you to say what the health benefits might or might not be.
Well, I'm not going to try and play the doctor either. It is often promoted. Well, the
Yeah,
first
I've read that it's
Zen monk
healthy. I have read that. I agree.
the first Zen monk that brought tea to Japan about 800 years ago wrote a treatise called "Drink Tea for the Health of the Nation." Was the translation of it, and
What was that in Japanese?
I forget.
All right. Well, I
He's
won't worry about it then. Michael, a funny story that you might find interesting, and the people might, was I went when I was in China. I was in this Buddhist monastery, and Elisa's right. It is full of antioxidants, and generally, you can say antioxidants aren't bad for you. However, Lipton was sued by the FDA by calling them healthy antioxidants. So I shan't be sued by the FDA. But the story about I was in a Zen monastery. They don't call it Zen, of course, over in China, but it was a Buddhist monastery. And it was one that was in the Zhejiang area. And they said that the tea plants were taken from there over to Japan. So the Buddhist monks, I guess they hadn't quite developed Zen Buddhism. I think Martin might know a little bit more than me about that, but they were called a little bit different in China. And so they brought it over to Kyoto, and they couldn't decide how to plant them. So one of the people, the monks that had brought them back, got on a horse in a muddy field, and he rode down the horse. This is in Uji, and there is a sign up. I don't know if you went there, Michael, or not, but everywhere that the hoof went into the mud, they said plant a tea plant there. And so that was the first tea growing, according to the legend and the sign at the field, that they grew that. So I thought I got both sides of it, from where it came and where it went. And it was a very good, and Uji was, of course, the capital of where the emperor was. So all the people were there. And then, as you know, I'm sure you went over the history, that's where it developed, because that was the action of the to be with the emperor.
The one of the things that you just mentioned about the monks there was very interesting, because one of the stories is that the first teas in Japan were used to keep the monks awake during their meditations, which suggests that there's a fair amount of caffeine in the tea. Is that correct?
Well, yes, there is. As I mentioned when it first came up, that the white tea, the baby of the tea plant, has got extra everything in it. And one of the things that has extra is caffeine. So that's why we always say that white tea has the most amount of caffeine. And you may wonder, why is there caffeine in tea and why extra in the white tea? And it's generally a insect repellent. So it then serves at something. So just like if you were to go to Starbucks and have a bunch of coffee, several cups of coffee, you would get jittery. The bug consuming that white tea or the green tea, it gets jittery, and then of course bugs off. And so that is a little bit. Its function is a self-defense, because Michael, if you were to come after me, I could sort of run away from you. If Chris was to come after me, your son, I might not be able to run away from him. But the idea is that a plant has to make do with whatever it has in front of it. It's not going to be able to go around the corner and find a better home, or to walk away from pests that might want to eat it and consume it. So over the thousands and thousands of years, it's developed all these self-defense mechanisms, and caffeine is one of them. And the way it oxidizes is another one. So there's lots of ways that a tea plant. We love the way they taste generally there. So yes, I don't know if I went on too long on that.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. This has really been fascinating. We're going to open it up for questions in a moment. Just give you one chance. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to say about matcha, about tea, about Harney and Sons?
Well, we're always
Go for
pleased.
it.
I remember when I went down to the Hammond. And then we were just talking about, we'll have to bring my wife and our French intern down there in April. So that would be exciting. We had a great event there. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but that was a fun time. And I don't know. I guess I met Martin at the time. Is that true, Martin?
That was just 10 years ago when we had
Just
the
10 years.
It was just
10 years ago.
10 years, a lot happened in 10 years, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, a lot has happened in 10 years. Yeah. So that would be a fun time. So why don't we open up to questions?
Who would have a question here? Please raise your hand, make sure your microphone is turned on. Okay, Sue, did you
You
have your?
talked, yes. You talked about the tea leaves being under a canopy and in the shade, and that they develop in the shade. And I'm wondering about, I was under the impression from a long time ago that the development of chlorophyll required sunlight. And you're saying that's not the case. So I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, I mean, the tea plant, like chlorophyll is the light harvesting mechanism inside a individual cell. So the idea is that the radiation, the sun that might give you a sunburn or warm you up on a cold winter day, that is that energy is absorbed by chlorophyll and converted into sugars. So that's the simplest way of saying it. So they do have it, and it's an essential part of the tea of any plant. But there's different ones. There's chlorophyll, and then certain plants turn they turn purple. I don't know if you ever seen different purple beans, green beans, but they're not green beans, are they? Purple beans. And the winter or the fall when the colors change. So there's chlorophyll and there's other pigments, but the main light harvesting one is called chlorophyll. So that the plant needs to try to get energy, and when it's covered over, the only reaction it can do is either, well, it could die, but it tries to live by creating more chlorophyll, which then appears to be green in your eyes.
Okay, a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. It's really
Yes,
all
ma'am.
in.
I hope that answered your question.
Somewhat, but I wonder about like asparagus, for example. When you cover them over when they're growing in the spring, they stay white. They don't turn green.
Well, it's a little bit different. I think those are, I mean, I'm not a plant scientist. I'm just a humble tea man, but I believe that the idea there is on other ones, just like downstairs in my basement, you're correct. That's from 100% when you have no light. So that's where they cover them over and they never had light. And they're a little bit albino, you might say. Like I know in my basement, my wife makes me put our some plants down there, dahlias, I think they are. And very soon they're going to take off and they'll be white. But as soon as I bring them outside, they turn green, right? So the asparagus, the white asparagus you see over in Europe, I don't believe they ever see any sunlight, because there's a certain tea plant over in China that they Anji Baicha, which it comes out white and then a week or two later it's turned green. So it's just sort of an exposure to sunlight with that.
Right.
So I think that that the chicken or egg story is that there's definitely chlorophyll in plants. They just needs to react with sunlight.
Mike,
and for white asparagus, Michael, you're asparagus expert.
no, I was just going to say, I think that I had heard, and you can correct me on this, but I think that I had heard that the coverings on the tea plants happens at some point after they've been exposed to the full sunlight for a certain amount of time, then it's covered over
Yes, sir.
so that they then are encouraged to create more.
Right. They weren't
chlorophyll.
stuck in the ground and never had any sunlight. That's absolutely true, Michael. Thank you for clarifying.
Who else
Thank
has a question?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Not really. Karen, did you have your hand up? Nope.
No, I'm good.
Well, you can still ask a question. Come on, we need a
Who
question.
else would have a question here?
Mike,
I don't see
I have a
any.
question. Mike.
He wants to know if he's going to have a job tomorrow. So he's going to ask a real softball question. That's what he's going to do.
There you go. So one thing we didn't talk about is matcha outside of the tea ceremony, other than the latte preparation. For for people looking to enjoy it, what's a good way to, or do I need to practice the tea ceremony to drink matcha? Or what's a good way to drink matcha outside the tea ceremony?
Okay, rather than a latte.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, your wife, I'm sure, makes over there at the tea shop a where you can do a quick matcha. I mean, there's the you just do it in a bowl and you keep it simple and just enjoy it by itself. And of course, the thick would taste much better than the thin. Not that the thin tastes bad, but the extra thick tastes much better. And then we had the guy Tsuyoshi over there in Japan also gave us these cocktail shakers, and so that was sort of a fun way to modernize the making of it, because that then you can put ice cubes in there and shake it up, and it tastes good. I don't know. My wife, maybe she's a gin girl, so maybe she could put some gin in that, and it would taste. It's a little not the exact way that it was designed to be all those years ago, but that's a way to do it.
Cool. And when we taste in the tea room, when you're tasting in the tasting room, what kind of flavors are you looking for in matcha? What's a signifier of a good matcha, good crop?
Well, it's got it's sort of a nori, but a much more intense with that. So it has that extra chemical that we were talking about, the straw flavor, if you will, and so it has a little bit extra than a normal sencha would have, or normal gyokuro. So it has that. Obviously, it's dissolved tea solids rather than the when you make it as a leaves, like a gyokuro, you would leave the leaves in the in the teapot.
Yeah.
But here you're actually consuming the leaf.
The other question that I've heard a lot of is, how much caffeine does matcha have in comparison to other teas or coffee? Where does it sit on the spectrum?
Right. So that's usually considered a very heavily caffeinated. So if you have a drive down to Washington, D.C., it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. What else we got? I see my father has stepped outside of the room for a second. Any other questions, folks?
Someone had an idea where they could get tea, Chanan. I'm not sure exactly where that is.
Let's see.
Well,
Chanan Tea House.
well, actually,
East
people-
Village, everybody. Okay, thank you.
people of the tea always get their sources direct from Japan, but there are some stores in the United States as well. But it's selecting good tea is really personal, and it's also like there's so many different grades. It's like selecting wine. Like you pick wine, it's like $10 or couple $100. So everybody has their own particular approach to maybe taste when it comes to tea, and I sort of get that experience from some of my wife's tea testing, when there's a practice that they have to just have 5 types of tea, and then they would test each one. They would make each cup, and they would just test each person in the room to say, can you identify this tea? And it's like a very daunting trick, because very few people get it all right, and so it just makes you focus on the essence of tea, and what really makes it kind of jump out and be full of character. So it's a practice that most tea people do, Urusenke, Motosenke, but it's I always relate it to a Zen practice in a way, because like it really brings you just to the moment of drinking that bowl. So to have it in a shaker, kind of like you lose the distance. But if you're doing it with a whisk, it certainly has a certain personal flavor. And I noticed that if you do it a certain way, it tastes different than, let's say, you do it the day before. So you find this practice so much a way of navigating the mind and also your taste. It's very mysterious. This is what I would encourage you to at least buy a bowl, a whisk, and a scoop to be able to make your own tea and test out different flavors and see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any last questions?
Anybody else? Any other
Would
questions?
love to answer any of them.
Stephen, yes. Yeah, I see your hand up there.
Oh,
Can you
Yeah,
hit your,
I have a question.
okay. Stephen, we'll
Um,
get back to you. Hannah, go ahead.
Okay, the question is, and this may have just been answered. You've spoken a lot about the real pleasures of very high end, very thick matcha. And so I'm wondering if there are some special experiences particular to the thinner matchas.
Well, they're very good. I mean, the thin matcha is, it's not like we're I would say that they, as Michael said. Michael, do you want to speak on that one?
The thin tea, which is made with the jobetsugi, is very refreshing. It is lighter in his body. Thick tea it takes a little bit getting used to. It's a little bit almost like a gruel. It's quite thick, but it's surprisingly sweet. So it has a different consistency to it, a different feel to it, tongue feel to it. But it's something different. And that's the best way I can say it.
Okay,
To be tried in different ways.
thank you.
Stephen, if you have a question, could you put on your microphone, please? Click the. Steve, no, I can't hear you. You're still muted. You need to go to the
Left.
bottom left. Okay, good. That should be good. No, you, okay,
should
like
be
that.
good now.
Should be good.
Okay. Yes, I'm kind of a new tea student, and I heard something, and I'd like to have it explained. I don't know whether it's fiction or not. When you go to a tea company and they say have 5 different grades of matcha, and I was told that the upper levels of the grades of matcha are best used with koicha rather than uzucha. And I don't know if that's true. So I'm asking.
I
Mike,
defer
would
to
you,
Michael on that.
the matcha is typically the big division is between the matcha made for thin tea and matcha made for thick tea.
Mhm.
Within the different schools, different heads of the schools or high tea masters prefer their own mixtures or brands of each of the teas. And other than the thin tea, thick tea division, it becomes then a question of your own preference for this or that um, blend of tea.
So it's more or less a fiction, and it's just basically based on your own preferences.
It's not a fiction. The one and the other, they are blended and for different uses. So they typically would perform best at the concentrations that they're made for, thick tea or thin tea.
Okay.
Could I
Thank
jump
you.
in for a second? I can say from an experience with Harney and Sons teas that the higher levels of matcha are a little bit sweeter. So with a higher concentration of the leaves in the cup, the sweeter tea is going to give you a nicer experience there. As my father was saying, the thick tea experience is very dense. You're tasting proportionally that much more of the plant. So even a smaller amount of bitterness might come through stronger in the flavor. So certainly with the Harney and Sons different tea grades, the upper grades are just that proportionally a little bit sweeter. And so when more concentrated, you do taste a difference there.
Anyone else?
Okay, I think it's just about this time, 8 o'clock. So
Then let's first of all thank Michael for his time and for his expertise. If you haven't had the pleasure on your next trip near Millerton, New York, you must, or Soho, in the city, you must take the opportunity to go and try some of Michael's teas, both matchas and senchas of all varieties. I think it's about 300 different styles of tea that you sell. Is that correct, Mike?
Well, a little bit more, but that's close enough.
Well, give it a try, folks. And again, thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you. Alrighty. Thank you, Michael.
So like as a
Thank you, Martin.
last statement, next tea opening that we're having at the Hammond Museum is on April 23rd. We are having a tea ceremony, but very, very limited. Sorry. Only 10 people could actually sit down and have sweets and tea, and the other 10 people could only sit and watch, which would be torture for some people. But, you know, essentially, that's the only way we could actually accommodate the crowd that we have and the capacity that we have right now. However, one thing that we're going to do is that the first 10 people to register, and not today, but like, you know, probably when the website goes up, it'll launch something that says, okay, it'll open up the tea ceremony offering, and for those who are tea members, Hammond Museum tea members, they will get the tea and sweets for free if they happen to be selected. So if you happen to be number 11, you'll miss out. But if you're number 11, you could actually sit in the back and watch everybody do the tea. But the first 20 people, that's how we're going to do it. And so let's give it a shot and see. Unfortunately, like, you know, we don't have the capacity to do everybody, but if you actually see the event in the tea room that we have and actually see how people's experience, you could actually speak to each other. And then we will actually plan our next event when the weather gets a little warmer and we can have this as a regular event. Okay, and then we can then choose how we design it depending on who becomes a team member. And again, Michael's organizing that in terms of like getting people together and discussing this topic. So we will actually speak more about it, and actually maybe Michael will put some announcements on the website, you know, when you're ready.
Sure.
Okay, so this is a start, beginning of a new thing, so I appreciate it. And so I appreciate everybody coming into this element of tea. And please, if you have any comments, questions, please write in and actually send your comments to the Hammond Museum, and it would be great feedback. And
the final reminder is that if you go to YouTube and enter Hammond Elements of Tea, you will be able to find the preceding 8 recordings, 8 sessions that we have recorded here and placed there on the different elements of tea. Tonight's session will be up in a couple of days when Martin, with the help of the IT people at the Hammond, will put this on the web.
well, like we do everything
the
around
others.
here, we'll figure it out somehow when we get down to it. But in any case, thank you again. You folks have been great. And again, thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thank you, Michael. And Mr. Harney, thank you so much.
Thank you all.